people have a tendency to think mushrooms are plants. They're not plants. They are actually a third life form. They do not have the cell wall. They actually produce digestive juices like animals, but they're kind of locked in place. Think of them as, an animal that just has no desire to go anywhere. I think we can all associate with that in the last 2 years. But what we're going to talk about tonight is how to go about identifying mushrooms. And then I want to cover 8 really excellent beginner level mushrooms for food and medicine that are around here. Why is this not? Okay, so just continue on the brief introduction here. So yes, my background, I have a master's in medicinal chemistry, a Ph.D. in physical organic chemistry. I devoted my life to not creating molecules, but taking molecules that man and God has made and figuring out how to use them to better mankind. And as I got farther into it, I kept switching more away from the molecules mankind was making and back to the ones that God made with the plants, because plants have some pretty amazing powers. And as a little over 2 years ago, I actually started up the Medicine Man Plant Co, where it's ancient plants scientifically supported for modern issues. So these are a series of products. Currently, I have 7 out. I got 2 more coming out, but things to help the brain, the immune system, kidney stones, gout, all these sort of things. So if you're more interested, you can talk to me after the presentation or look up Medicine Man Plant Co. Also, I am the author of Idiot's Guide to Foraging, which covers 70 really easy to find, easy to use North American plants. But the way the book works is, since they didn't actually send me out all over North America, I had to focus on plants that could be found in Texas, as well as places of lesser importance. So everything in that book is found here. But those are the 2 main things, if you wonder what I do. But really I used to be a research chemist, but for the last 2 years, what I've really become is a professional caveman, trying to teach other people caveman activities for health and well-being. Segue to a caveman. Some of you might recognize this. This is Utsi. This was a recreation of remains of a 5,000-year-old caveman found in the Alps of Europe. And it's pretty much our greatest representation of the technology and the tools and the clothing and the foods and the medicines that they were using 5,000 years ago. And in particular, he had strands with this birch polypore. This is a type of mushroom that grows on birch trees. And the reason they believe he had this is because the birch polypores are antimicrobial. So he had a lot of wounds. From what we can tell, he was not a nice man. He had a lot of old injuries and a lot of new injuries, but one of the things that helped him survive this, to keep the wounds from getting infected, were the birch polypore mushrooms. Okay, so like I said, today we are going to look at how to identify a mushroom and then delve into some really easy to recognize, fairly easy to find, useful mushrooms from around this area. I'm really glad I get to give this talk because like 3 times a week, I get a picture from someone saying, hey, can I eat this? And this is the sort of picture they send me. This is not enough information to properly identify a mushroom. So the basic rule of thumb is when you are trying to identify a mushroom, you need to see 8 to 10 structural features. Most people don't realize there are 8 to 10 structural features on a mushroom. You gotta get down and look at the mushroom. Taking a mushroom, looking at it over there, you're not gonna get the information. You gotta be down in there. Now, here's one important thing you need to know when you're looking at a new mushroom. There is no mushroom that will hurt you just by touching it. You can touch the mushroom. You can bend it, you can twist it, you can break it open. Don't lick your fingers afterwards. Wash your hands, but just touching a mushroom to see the structural features, that's okay. All right, so identification. First thing you need to do is just figure out, what type of mushroom is it? And I like to break it up into the 5 classes. There's the traditional toadstools. There is the shelf or bracket mushrooms, the sort of seashell-y things you see growing on the side of a tree. There are the round puffballs that you might find growing on dead wood or in the grass. There is weird jelly gooey type mushrooms, and there are ones that just make you go, what the hell is this alien creature growing in my yard? So once you break it down to those 5 categories, you already are halfway there. Maybe not halfway, but you're on your track. Okay, so let's talk about the structural features you need to look at in the mushroom. As I said, you want to look at 8 to 10 structural features. So these are the basic ones. The substrate. When I say substrate, that is what is it growing on. Then we're looking at structures on the cap, the gills, the spores, the stipe, the stem, the shroud, the veil, the base, the vulva, and the scent. We're going to go over each one of these in more detail to kind of help you learn what you should actually be looking at. So let's start with the substrate. Mushrooms are very, very, very picky about where they grow. So depending on the species and the variety, it's going to be tied into a very specific substrate or thing that it's growing on. It could be the soil, it could be dead wood, it could be poop. There's a number of mushrooms that really like poop, or even growing on insects. So around here we have a type of cordyceps mushroom that infests moths, and you see these weird zombified moths with the mushrooms growing on them. But that is going to be an indication of the specific species, or at least the genus of the mushroom. What is it growing on? Because a particular species or genus is only going to grow on one type of substrate. You're not going to find a dead wood mushroom growing in poop. You're not going to find an insect mushroom growing in the soil. It's going to be very specific. So that alone tells you a lot. All right, now let's look at the cap. Lots of caps out there. So when we're looking at a cap, you want to note, what is the overall shape of the cap? Is it going to be round? I need more hands. Is it going to be round? Is it going to be domed? Is it going to be funnel shaped? Is it, there's all sorts of different caps, but the overall shape of the cap is very important to understand and to recognize, because each species of mushroom will have a very specific cap shape. Then also the size of the cap, the color of the cap. What color is the cap? People they think white mushrooms. There's beautiful blue mushrooms up there. There's golden mushrooms. There's red mushrooms. There's red mushrooms with white specks. But those are going to be specific to the species. So seeing the cap, seeing the colors on the cap, the size of the cap, and then secondary structures on the cap. So like on the milk indigo here, the blue one, there are rings in the surface of the cap. In the fringed sawgill, it's a furry, fuzzy sort of mushroom. The shaggy mane, it has kind of almost long curls hanging off it. And then the Caesar is just kind of a smooth sort of thing. So those secondary structures, again, are things that help you zero in on the specific species of mushroom. Kind of straightforward, but we are far from done. Now, the gills. So when you think about mushrooms, you normally think on the underside there are gills. Yes, there may be gills. They could be true gills, they could be false gills, they could be polypores, they could be tubes. So let's talk about each one of these. So normally, like I say, you think gills when you think of a mushroom. And so the top two here, we have true gill. A true gill is where the gill tissue of the mushroom is totally separate and independent of the cap tissue. And if you peel it, it actually peels off. There'll be a thin membrane separating the gill and the cap. And so you can actually very easily peel the gills off. That is a true gill. But because nature finds things that works, it goes, oh, there's a false gill. So certain species of mushrooms will have what's called a false gill, where the gill is actually just the bottom of the cap deeply rippled. So the gills may look like regular mushroom gills, but they're actually just a continuation of the cap material. A little easier to identify are the polypores, where instead of the long gills like on a fish, they have just a tiny bunch of little holes on the underside of the mushroom. So polypores, think many holes. So if you flip it over, not worrying about poison because you can just tip it over and look at it. If it has all these tiny holes, that is a polypore. Very common around here. There's a bunch of boletus and things like that in the Houston area. And then finally, we have tubes. And in the case of tubes, it's this, like it says, the underside of the mushroom has a bunch of tubes dangling from it. That's another type of gill tissue. The gills are what produce the spores. The spores are the baby mushrooms. They don't produce seeds, they produce individual single cells that then grow into new mushrooms. So they go into the mycelium and then into the fruiting body. But they're produced by the gills or the true or false gills, the polypores, or these two. So those are the spore producing parts of the mushroom. But wait, there's more. Because where does the gill attach to the cap and stem is another structural feature that's very important. So, and this applies to both true gills and false gills. Do the gills go right up to the stem and actually attach to the stem? Do they stop just before the stem, which is called free, or do they actually run down the stem? So that's a decurrent. So again, if you're looking at a mushroom, where the gills stop on the stem is very specific to the species. This is another structural feature. You're starting to understand now when someone sends me a picture of a round thing half a mile away, I don't know what they got, because I need to see these things. And again, but wait, there's more. In many mushrooms, the gills change color. Either if you touch them, they start going from yellow to blue or green, or just over time, they change colors too. So is there a color change on the gills when you like poke at the gills? Does that change the gill's color? That's another structural feature you need to know to properly identify a mushroom. So we talked about the spores. The gills drop the spores. The spores are the baby mushrooms, just individual cells that eventually turn into the mycelium and turn into the fruiting body. But the color of the spores is very specific to the species of mushrooms. And to really grab the, unfortunately, I didn't have a good sample of really different. In fact, with the oyster mushroom, this is a little more of a violet, kind of off-white to violet color, whereas the Texas Chanterelle here is a white color. The easiest way of getting a spore print is you take your mushroom cap, you set it down on a piece of glass, like a microscope slide, and just let it sit there overnight. The cap will drop the spores onto a piece of the microscope slide, and then you hold it up to the light or put it against a black background and a white background and figure out what color is the spores that this mushroom is producing. Because the color of the spore is another structural feature you need to know to properly identify a mushroom. Did you have any idea there was all these things? Yeah, there's a lot going on with mushrooms. A lot going on. They're cool. They're kind of scary, actually. Okay, then the stem, or if you really want to be fancy, you call it a stipe. But we'll just call it the stem. The stem of the mushroom. We're looking at the stem of the mushroom now. Again, we're looking at what color is it? How thick is it? Where is it positioned in regards to the cap? Because in some cases, it may be in the center of the cap. Other cases, it may be off to the side of the cap. Okay, I'm going to ask you to visualize something here to understand a stem off to the side of a cap. You ready? The Starship Enterprise. You know what that looks like, right? You got the disc feature, and then you got the little thing connecting down off on one side. So with species of mushrooms, the stem, some species, they'll have the stem right in the center, and others it will have off on one side, like the Starship Enterprise. So when we're saying position of the stem, are we looking at our traditional 4-year-old drawing of a mushroom? Or are we looking at science fiction TV shows that have been around since the 60s? So I'm trying to give you things that can lock into your brain. Okay, also, is the stem absent? There are certain things, especially on shelf or bracket mushrooms, where there is no stem. The whole mushroom is just growing right off the side of the dead tree. And like with the caps, secondary structures. Is there a webbing on the stem? Is there patterns? Is there hair? Different things like that. All these different potential structural features that we saw back on the cap also can apply to the stem, and the stem doesn't have to be the same color as the cap. One of the key things is the shroud or veil. So mushrooms basically hatch from eggs. And sometimes that egg, again, depending on the specific species or genus, part of that eggshell, air quotes here, I'm doing air quotes, may remain attached either to the cap, in which case you have the structural features. If you think like the Mario Brothers video game mushroom, the red mushroom with the white spots on it, those white spots are the remains of the egg from which the mushroom hatched from. But other cases, the veil will be on the stem, and it may either hang downwards or reach up, again, depending on the species. So if there's a veil there, that helps you identify the mushroom. And then what direction the veil is pointing. Is it pointing up or pointing down is another structural feature. A lot of structural features. There's a lot going on in mushrooms. So, like I said, the veil may not be present, but if it is, like I said, it can be either hanging down or pointing up depending on the specific species of mushrooms. But wait, this is going to take a while. The base. So now we're looking at the base of the mushroom. Is it swollen? Is it connected to other mushrooms? Or is it unconnected? So just the very base of the mushroom, what it's doing, is it connected, unconnected, swollen, narrow, all these sort of things. These are, again, structural features that are going to be very specific to a specific type of mushroom, specific species of mushrooms. You're never going to find one that has the connected mushrooms standing alone. You're never going to find the ones that are standing alone connected. The swollen ones are always going to swell. The non-swollen ones are never going to swell. The mushrooms are pretty standardized in their own species. They're very repeatable. So it does help when you're trying to tell two mushrooms apart. Because once you start understanding what you're looking at, what you need to look at, it actually becomes quite easy to recognize mushrooms. Okay, going back to that egg, if it remains down at the base of the stem, we call that a vulva. And again, the vulva may be present depending on the species or may not be dependent, but it is species specific. So you can use the presence or absence of this vulva, this egg sac at the base of the mushroom as one of the structural features needed to identify the mushrooms. And we see here, we have the vulva at the bottom and a little bit of the veil hanging down from it. Another feature, the scent. So most people, when they think of mushrooms, they're used to store-bought mushrooms that have that mushroomy scent. A lot of mushrooms have very different scents. So around here, like we have the oyster mushrooms. They smell fruity, like almost like apricots. We have a stinkhorn, which smells like dog poo, because it spreads its spores by attracting flies. The spores of the stinkhorn are up here in this little glob of brown stuff. It stinks like dog poo. Flies come in and go, ooh, dog poo, I like this. Blend in it, and then fly off with the spores and deposit them elsewhere. Then there's also chemical smells, like turpentine or camphor or things like that. So the odor or the scent of the mushroom is another structural feature. Okay, so we gotta whip that through pretty quickly, but again, just to recap, what is it growing on? What does the cap look like? What color is it? How big is it? Are there secondary structures on it? What shape is it? Looking at the underside on the gills, is it gills or polypores or tubes? And if it's gills, is it a true gill or a false gill? True gill being the gill tissue is separate from the cap, and the false gill, the gill tissue is a continuation of the cap. It's one complete unit. The spores, the color, and if you want to get really deep into it, even the shape. If you want to pull out your microscope, you can look at the individual shapes of the spores, and that will also be another structural feature. The stem, what's going on with the stem? What color is it? How thick is it? And is there anything attached to the stem? The shroud or veil, is there a little hula skirt on it or a tutu? The base, is there anything going on? Is it connected to other mushrooms? Is it swollen? Is it not? Is there a vulva present? And the scent. So lots of structural features to look at. And really, especially when you are looking at a new mushroom, these are all the structural features you really need to look at. Especially, oh, my books are under my computer. Okay. There are, and at the end of the presentation, I do have some recommended books that you can take. Okay, so any questions here in the audience? And I'm going to open up the chat window just a second here. Okay, so we got one question. Will the PowerPoint be available later? Yeah, so we've talked to the Herb Society. We're recording this. I'm going to post it on my YouTube channel. You can get to it through Foraging, Texas, or Medicine and Plant Co. All right, and that's all that. Okay, so let's move on. Oh, question.
How many, roughly, how many 1,000, 10,000, 9,000, how many different mushrooms are there?
Okay, so the question is, how many different types of mushrooms are there? Recent estimate, if you took all the plants in the world, there is approximately 2 to 3 orders of magnitude more mushrooms. Yeah, most of them are very, very tiny. And most of them don't produce these toadstools. But yeah, there are several orders of magnitude more mushrooms on this planet than there are types of plants. So there's more species of mushrooms than there are species of plants. If you want to name something because you're the first person to discover it, mushrooms is where you want to go. If you're egotistical, become a mushroomologist. Okay, why is this not? All right, so we're about to talk about some really good mushrooms in the area. I just want to talk about, when I talk about the medicinal properties of these mushrooms, because I am a chemist, as a scientist, I need proof that these things actually have these medicinal powers. And my most common way of doing that is the National Library of Medicine has a website, the pubmed.gov, which sounds like a place you want to go to drink, drinks with cocktails with no parasols in them and so forth. But what this is a library of all scientific research in the realm of medicine. So in the search bar here, you can type in anything from, how do I beat cancer, to what causes shingles, to what are the medicinal properties of oyster mushrooms. Usually you just go oyster mushroom medicinal, or dandelions medicinal, or liver medicinal, things like that. But you can get all the scientific research that has been done on these plants, on these, anything, any medicinal research is in here. So I always send people, if you want to check on what I'm saying, here's where you go to check it. This is where I got it. And if you can't trust the, moving on. All right, let's start with one of my absolute favorite, the oyster mushrooms. And this is a really good one to be talking about because right now, this is oyster mushroom weather. Wintertime, rainy, 50s to 60s is where these things start blowing up all over Houston. Let me say something here though. So when it comes to foraging, you are not allowed to walk through the city parks and the state parks and so forth, gathering mushrooms willy-nilly. You are limited to private land, but you are also allowed to harvest 1 gallon of mushrooms per person per day for your own private use, not for sale, in the Sam Houston National Forest, the Davy Crockett National Forest, and the Angelina National Forest. So in the national forests, not the national parks, not the national preserves, not the national historic sites, but the national forests. So in Texas, we have the Sam Houston National Forest, the Davy Crockett National Forest, and the Angelina. And right now, deer hunting season is over with. It's a good time to be up in the Sam Houston looking for mushrooms. Yeah, don't go mushroom hunting in deer hunting season. It's probably not a good idea. Yeah, Angelina, Davy Crockett, and the Sam Houston National Forests. Okay, so when you're out there, start checking the dead trees. Not just trees that are standing, but trees that are dead on the ground. But you're looking for the oyster mushrooms in the, sorry, I was trying to get this window out of the way here. You're looking for them on the dead trees because they grow on dead trees. They have white to gray caps. So when you're looking at the mushrooms, especially from the underside, if they're up on the tree, they're going to have white gills, but the top part of the mushroom will either be white or kind of a shiny gray. They have white, false, decurrent gills. So false gills, we know that's now the gills are just a continuation of the cap. Decurrent means that the gills run down the stem, and the stem is off-centered of the mushroom. So going back to the Starship Enterprise. So it looks like Captain Kirk was not steering well and he hit a tree. So we got these oyster-shaped mushrooms with the gills running down almost all the way to the tree trunk itself. If you break it open, it releases it releases an apricot scent. I don't like apricots, so I'm not wild about the scent, but they cook up and don't taste like apricots. They taste really good. So cool, rainy weather, especially in the winter. What do you do with them? You're gonna find saute in butter is a very common way of treating a lot of these wild mushrooms. But there's another cool thing you can do that works really well with the oyster mushrooms, and that is pickle them. Pickled oyster mushrooms. If you're lazy, you can just throw them, slice them up into like little pickle strips and just throw them in a jar of pickle juice that you have left over. Or you can use the Ball Blue Book of Canning and Preserving Pickled Okra recipe. Works really well. Okay, so you're eating these. What sort of medicinal benefits are you going to get from it? Well, one, they're very anti-inflammatory. So if you have anything, even for like rheumatoid arthritis or any sort of inflammation, painful inflammation, the oyster mushrooms will help with that. It's what's called an immunomodulator. So way back at the beginning of the coronavirus, one of the fears was what they called a cytokine storm, which is where your immune system just freaks out and starts attacking everything. And so immunomodulators prevent that from happening. Luckily, it turned out not to be a big concern with COVID, unlike the Spanish flu after the 1919 sort of thing. But if you need, for some reason, to kind of prevent your immune system from freaking out, oyster mushrooms sauteed in butter, that's good medicine. Anti-diabetic. So they help with blood sugar control. Very useful. So when anti-diabetic, type 2 diabetes, not type 1. They've been shown to have anti-cancer properties, in particular, blocking the growth of tumors or the regrowth of tumors after they've been surgically removed. So another reason to be out in the woods looking for oyster mushrooms. They help fight cancer. And then also on the cancer side in particular, there are antioxidants. So they help protect the body against free radical damage. Really, really, really good mushrooms. Like I said, tomorrow would be a really good day to be out in Sam Houston looking for these things. Saturday, yeah, wait till Saturday. I'll go tomorrow. Okay, any questions about the oyster mushrooms? You also see the growing clusters, yes. Oh, and as far as cancer, okay, just to go sideways, now let's go back to, go to PubMed, look up prickly pear cactus cancer. Most amazing anti-cancer plant out there, prickly pear cactus. Okay, that's a whole nother. Yes?
I didn't see a stem per se. You said it's off center.
Yeah, and it's a little hard, like it'll have a little stem there once you see it, and then like little stems here. So not much of a stem, but there is technically a stem there. Yes.
Do you have the yellow oysters and the pink oysters?
Okay, the question here is, at least in the Houston area, do we have the yellow oysters or the blue oysters or some of the other more exotic oysters? No. No, we only have like 2 different species and they're both white or gray. Okay, my personal favorite, I wish we could get rid of that. Oh, whoops. So, sorry, I'm just a little frustrated by this bar up here on the top. Can I drag it somewhere? Okay. Ah, no, that didn't help much. Is there a hide feature? Now, we'll leave it down. Okay, so the Heresies, generally known as the lion's mane, the bear's tooth head mushrooms, but these are another deadwood species, so they're growing on dead woods. They are white to slightly yellowish, The whiter they are, the more white they are, the younger they are, and the better they are. So you want to look for them when they're kind of snowy white. If you know the Hostess snowball, like cakes, that, what's this face? Someone here doesn't like Hostess snowballs. Okay, a little, all right. I'm a coconut fiend. But anyway, so they basically look like the snowball snack cakes stuck on trees, either an actual ball. So we have the lion's mane here. Hopefully you can see this. And then the long tube and the short tube. So the Heresium americanum and the Heresium chlorella reides. Very distinct. Nothing else looks like this out there. White to yellowish tubes, no defined stems. They're just growing in a clump on the side of the dead wood. They have a very definite mushroomy scent to them. So when you think like white button mushrooms that you get in the grocery store, or portobello mushrooms, I'm going to go chemistry, that one octanol sense, in case there's some other chemists here. The mushroom scent is mainly due to one octanol. It has that mushroom scent. And again, cool, rainy weather. Usually the day after hunting season ends, a buddy of mine, we head up into the Sam Houston forest looking for these. Because again, they're very common around here. They're very common along Spring Creek and that area. You can't harvest them there, but at least you can see them in the wild there. Oh, side note, H.E.B. recently had lion's mane. These for sale for $99 a pound. Just a, so yeah, they're now you can cultivate them.
How long do mushrooms last? Seems like H.E.B.
Okay, so in the wild, mushrooms, because everything else is trying to eat them too, you have about a 3-day window. If they are cultivated, then protected from things trying to eat them, then 5 days. You want to get them fresh.
So is it illegal to harvest mushrooms in non-national forests?
Yeah. So the question is it illegal to harvest the mushrooms in a non-national forest? Yeah, so in the state parks and the city parks. In another month, morel mushroom season will start up in the Austin area. The city of Austin loves it when the morel mushrooms start popping up in the state or in the city parks because they earn tens of thousands of dollars in fines from people illegally harvesting the mushrooms. Oh, it's a moneymaker for them. And then they probably eat them.
Why don't we get morels here?
Okay, the question, why do we not get morels here? Morels need a basic soil. They need an alkaline, chalky limestone soil. It's too acidic here. Oops, come on. Okay, what do you do with the Heresies? Saute them in butter. Now, here's the thing. When you do that, they taste like lobster. So any sort of lobster roll, lobster chowder, lobster salad, you can make with these Heresies. They taste like lobster. Absolutely delicious. Or you can dry them and make a tisane, which is the fancy herbalist way of saying a tea. Make a tea out of it, because then you get the medicinal. Well, you get the medicinal effects from eating it, or drinking it, or taking the brain pill by Medicine Man Planko. But so one of the things that the Heresium, there's compounds in there, the beta glucans, that have been shown to increase the number of neural connections between the cells in your brain. So they help connect more brain cells together with all the associated benefits of memory, recall, cognition, and problem solving. They also are an antidepressant. They help reduce the attention deficit disorders, but like I said, enhance cognition. So if you're into Sudoku puzzles or the escape rooms or something like that, go get yourself some $99 a pound lion's mane from H.E.B. and then go tackle that. Or go for a walk in the woods right now. Maybe not right now, it's dark, but tomorrow. I just vision a convoy of people heading off to the Sam Houston. Okay, here's the thing. The 4-notch loop trail in the Sam Houston National Forest. The 4-notch loop trail. That's your best mushroom find. Do you know my wife? No, the four-notch loop trail has a lot of water in it, and mushrooms need water. So you're going to get muddy, but you're going to get mushrooms. Okay, next common mushroom, very easy to recognize, no other mimics, is what's called the Indigo Milk Cap. So the first two we saw were growing on dead wood. This actually grows out of the detritus on the soil of the woods. And it can be hardwoods or pine record. Okay. All right, so it grows in the soil of the forest floor. Ringed, well, blue, it has these rings on it, concentric rings. And when I say concave cap, I got a side picture here. Think of a funnel. So it goes down and then back up. So this is, the bottom picture here is one of these indigo milk caps cut in half, looking at it from the side. Now, it's a little hard to see here, but it does have true gills. Even though the gills are the same color as the cap, there is a distinct membrane, and the gills do peel off as a separate type of tissue from the cap. So it has the true gills. These gills run down the stem some, so it's decurrent gills. It produces blue spores, so if you do the spore print, where you cut the cap off, set it on a piece of glass, let it sit there overnight, it will be covered with a blue powder underneath, where it's dropping the spores. But also when you break it, it bleeds a blue ink. So, I mean, the question is, are there any other common blue mushrooms? No, there are some purple ones, but none like this. None that have all these structural features. So the concave cap, the rings, the blue color, you break it, it bleeds blue from the cap, the gills, the stem, all the oozes. This, like if you remember Star Wars, the blue milk that Luke's, yeah, I'm a nerd. The blue milk that Luke Skywalker was drinking there. That's what it does. These are mild weather. So these are spring and fall. They don't like the cold weather. They don't like the hot weather. So after the oysters are done and the lion's mane are done, then you start looking for the indigo milk. Yes? Good question. Will it make a good watercolor? It is somewhat staining. I don't have it. It will stain skin. It will stain cotton. You will need some sort of mordant with it, which is another compound that helps bind it to the cotton or the wool, things like that. As far as a watercolor, never tried.
So are there any incredibly dangerous mushrooms in this area?
Okay, the question is, are there any incredibly dangerous mushrooms in the area? Wait until the end. Just to tease you. Yeah, so there's the destroying angel, there's the death cap, there's the green vomiter, there's the red vomiter. You don't want to mess with those four. Okay, so what do you do with the indigo milk? So add it to pasta sauce. If you want to have kind of, especially Alfredo, where it would normally be white, and you have this desire to serve your friends and family blue Alfredo sauce, if you never want to be invited back or whatever, you just throw it in there. Chopped up fried, these make an excellent fried mushroom. And they also make a very interesting made from scratch cream of mushroom soup. Again, on the blue side. It fades some, so it's not a rich blue, but it's a very distinct, not white color once it's done cooking. So you can test how observant are your friends, or how much do your friends trust you. Okay, the question, the blue pigment, it is an azuride, which leads to the medicinal properties. So the blue compound in there, it's anti-diabetic, so it helps with the blood sugar control, anti-inflammatory, but antiviral. So when you get something that's antiviral, that's big news, especially nowadays. So we probably can't talk about it. But it also has been shown to soothe ulcers and help, because there's a bit of Well, it's not like if you know mucilage, like slimy okra and cactus pads, it doesn't have quite that same sliminess to it, but there is a viscosity to this blue milk that helps seal the mucosal membrane surfaces of the gastrointestinal tract. So it helps repair the slime in your stomach, what it boils down to. Nothing else looks like it. Very, very easy to recognize. Side note, as they get older, they do start to get colonized by a green mildew. So if you start to see blue, but it's turning green, don't eat that. It's too late. So you want it nice and blue with, or kind of white and blue rings, no sign of green. Because green means it's on its last legs and it's been colonized by the next wave of fungus that wants to eat it. Nature likes eating things, if you haven't figured that out. Okay, any other questions? Next, the Texas Chanterelle, Cantharellus texanus. Very neat one. These are tiny little orange mushrooms. They almost look like the hunter's orange sort of color. Very, very easy to spot. They grow out of the forest soil, but only around oaks. They form a symbiotic relationship with oak roots. So if you're out in the Sam Houston forest, along one of the ravines, along the 4-Notch Trail, where there are oaks, that's where you want to look for it, because they need water, they need oaks. So that right there is a really key indicator. Orange cap, orange false decurrent, the gills, so it has the false gills, and you can kind of see here the gills start running down the stem. These are the one annoying things about these. Do I have it on the next one? No. Okay. The stems in this case may be separate, so you'll have individual mushrooms popping up, but occasionally you'll get two that are like a Siamese twin mushroom. So you generally won't have more than two fused together. Normally it's just one individual one. If you do the spore print, it's kind of a yellowish orange sort of color, not the same color as the cap, it's lighter than that. Again, these are mild weather. So these really Mother's Day weekend, I find to be a very good time to get in lots of trouble. I'm the second child. I'm allowed to get in trouble. But Mother's Day weekend usually is the sign of the time of year when you want to be looking for these. And then, late September, after the kids are back in school. Now, these have a really neat flavor. They don't have a mushroom flavor. They have more of a peppery, sort of spicy flavor to them. So they do really good in different sauces to add this peppery sort of flavor to it, stews, curry, or sauteed in butter. Every mushroom is good sauteed in butter. As far as medicinal uses, there's no research on any medicinal uses of the Texas Chanterelle. It's not saying there aren't any uses for it. It's just saying there's been none that have been researched. So as a scientist, I don't feel comfortable saying anything about medicinal uses of the Texas Chanterelle, as opposed to the golden Chanterelle. This is another one. The main difference between this one and the Texas Chanterelle, the color of the golden one is a bright yellow. It's this color, which is hard to see because we have very orange light here. I'm going to keep that for now. All right, so you have these golden mushrooms sitting out there. Now, just again to go sideways for a second, these are absolutely wonderful mushrooms. They are the mild weather, spring and fall, which is the same time the crossvine is flowering and dropping its flowers. The crossvine flowers are the same color yellow as the golden chanterelles. So you'll be walking through the woods and you'll see a cluster of yellow chanterelles. You'll be really excited. You go run over and it's a damn crossvine flower. Totally not edible. But the golden chanterelle is really good. So yellow cap, fringed and ripply along the edges. And in the next picture, we'll see it better. False gills, the gills go down the stem. You can see this, the gills running down the stem. Like the Texas chanterelle, the stems can be single. Occasionally, you'll get two fused together. It's more common with the Texas chanterelle than the golden chanterelle. Yellowish spores. In this case, the spores are very similar in color to the chanterelle, the golden chanterelle itself. And like I said, the mild weather, spring and fall. A good one, they'll be about 1.5 inches across. So they can actually get fairly large for a free food mushroom with no mimics. So, but usually there'll be lots of them. There'll be dozens and dozens of them in an area. This last spring was, a year ago, was just absolutely amazing. It was the most perfect golden chanterelle weather I'd ever seen, and they were just everywhere. Yes.
Would you share your secret spot?
Okay, the question is, will I share my secret spots? Moving on. Yeah, right after I tell you my favorite fishing spot and where I stashed all the money I stole.
How about the hill country?
Okay, the question, how about in the hill country? So the golden chanterelle, I have not found in the hill country. They really need oak forests that are wet and acidic soil. Yeah, these, since this is the Houston chapter. Now, actually, okay, wait. Well, so the golden chanterelles, they are found all across North America, but in wet oak forests. So hill country doesn't have a lot of wet oak forests, but other parts of New York, Minnesota, they're up there, Iowa, Florida, and places like that, you'll find them up there. For those of you who aren't from Texas, welcome. Get here soon, unless you're from, never mind. Okay, so what do you use them in? You use them where you would regular, the white mushroom soup, stews, a nice venison stew and golden chanterelle stew, absolutely fantastic. Sauteed in butter. Yes, question.
So when you pick them, what's the best way to serve them so you can contribute on it?
Okay, great question. How do you pick them and preserve them to bring them home while you're walking through the woods? First off, they sell a specific knife for harvesting mushrooms. It has a curved blade because you don't pull it out of the ground. If you pull it out of the ground, you're pulling all the mycelium and all the dirt attached to it, and then all your mushrooms are getting dirty. So you want to cut it off, like just above the soil with this curved knife. The other end of this knife has a brush on it used to just brush off any of the detritus that's connected to the mushroom. Then you put it in a woven basket. The reason you use a basket is baskets have a nice open weave. So as you're walking through the forest, you are dropping spores from the mushrooms, spreading them around. Don't put them in a plastic container. Don't put them in a plastic bucket. You want a nice open weave, straw basket. Would we go to Salvation Goodwill, Salvation Army? They always have a ton of baskets there. Find one that matches your personality style and put them in there, and away you go. They'll be good for hours. Don't stack them too deep so they start crushing themselves under their own weight. But you can get quite a few. You're better off with a broader basket and short rather than a deep basket and narrow. One more thing. When you get home, do not wash them. If you wash these, they absorb the moisture and they just turn okra-ish when you try and cook them. So you just want to brush the dirt off, knock a few of the maggots off. They're protein, they're edible, they're fine. And away you go. Yeah, in fact, don't wash any of the mushrooms I've talked about. Shake them. They rarely get stored very long. It's like, yeah, I'm a mushroom fiend. They get eaten. If I'm going to store them, then I will put them in the veggie bags, the porous ones that breathe. Put them in that, and you can hold them like a day, maybe two. Put a piece of paper towel in there to absorb any moisture with them. Now, you can dehydrate these. Pretty much all the mushrooms you talked about tonight, you can dehydrate these mushrooms. Or, in the most part, you can pickle them too. Going back to the pickled oysters, just do the Blue Book of Canning and Preserving pickled oyster recipe. It's just vinegar, water, sugar, dill, salt. Very easy. Not pressure canned, it's just in the thing. Okay, on the golden chanterelle, these are found all over North America, up into Canada, and they do have medicinal properties. So we're going back to the anti-inflammatory. inflammatory, so they're good for any sort of swellings, irritated issues, like I said, even like rheumatoid arthritis or things like that, somewhat. They're not going to cure it, but they help, one more way of helping control the pain and so forth from that. Wound healing. There's been some really cool research on basically mashed up chanterelles applied to slow to heal wounds. It triggers better healing. So especially going to like type 2 diabetes where you have slow to heal wounds, the golden chanterelle poultice put on 15 minutes 3 times a day seems to speed up the healing process of the wound. Cool. Neuroprotective. What this means, if you're riding down the street in your bicycle and someone opens the door and you end up with a really bad concussion, for the next 3 or 4 weeks, you want to be eating these mushrooms. Because the golden chanterelles, the neuroprotective, they reduce inflammation in the brain due to brain injury, traumatic brain injury, or strokes, or really anything that is trying to damage brain cells. They've shown that the golden chanterelles help the brain recover from that sort of damage. Okay, so, great question. How do they figure this out? On the backs of giants, basically. So they'll find it does anti-inflammatory. Okay, it works on these tissues. What about these tissues? Oh, it works on those tissues. What about these tissues? Oh, it works on these tissues. Until you get to a brain in a jar and they go, whoa, it's helping here too. You don't want to know what scientists have access to. There's a lot of like brain cells floating around that are zapped and tortured. They hit with chemicals and then hit with other things to see if it helps them. So, yeah. Okay, anti-cancer and anti-hypertensive. So it helps with blood pressure. So very useful there. And just walking in the woods, collecting these is very good for blood pressure. But then eating them, maybe not in butter, but some of the other things, good for you that way. Okay, next one, the skull puffball. And this again is a mild season type 1. It looks like brown softballs laying out in the grass, but then when you pull it out of the ground or look at it, it actually has kind of a distinctive skull shape to it. So they grow in soil. They love grassy yards. They have the white to a brown surface. There's no exterior gill system. This is a puffball. What happens is the interior of this eventually decomposes into spores, and then something comes along and steps on it and releases this cloud of spores. So the puffballs, when you stop on the poof and release the spores, that's what they're doing. That's the interior of the puffball is changing into these spores. The outer skin dries and cracks open, and then it releases the spores into the air, spread it. So we'll talk about when you eat it, but the key thing is here, when you find it, if you cut it in half and it looks like you cut a marshmallow in half, pure homogeneous white all the way through, you're good to go. Okay, so no exterior gill system, no interior gill system, no interior structures whatsoever, just a homogeneous white marshmallow on the inside. So a thick stem, so it is considered, this part here is considered to be the stem, that's the stem there. The spores themselves are a greenish color, and they're mild weather. So these are best fried up. So you chop them up into cubes, batter them, deep fry them, away you go. Some people, though, I say they've started slicing them in long pieces, so you end up with like a 1/4 inch thick by 4 or 5 inch diameter skull type shapes, and make a pizza crust. So they put their cheese and their sauce and their pepperonis on top of it and bake that in the oven to make like a gluten-free pizza crust. Yeah.
You're always talking about baking or cooking. So what about raw?
A good question. You're asking, can you eat the mushrooms raw? Here's the thing they don't tell you in home economics class. All mushrooms are poisonous raw. Even the white little button mushrooms, you should not be eating those raw. They have poisons in them, but by cooking them, you get rid of those. Like at CC's Pizza, I love CC's Pizza, but in the salad bar, they have the white mushrooms. you shouldn't be eating those. They contain toxins that are bad for your liver. You always want to cook the mushrooms, regardless of the type of mushroom. Or no matter how they serve it to you, it should be cooked. Now, you have a liver, so the liver is going to take care of most of it from a lot of the domesticated mushrooms, like the white button mushrooms and stuff. The amount of poison is very low. You would have to eat a lot of the white button mushrooms to get the poison, but it's there. So, but you always want to cook your mushrooms. Okay, medicinal properties of the skull puffball. It is going back to that immunomodulation. So if your immune system is starting to kind of freak out, it tones it down. But at the same time, if the body is starting to show signs that maybe we need more of the active immune system, the antibodies, it pumps it up some. So the immunomodulators, they raise it when necessary and drop it when necessary. But also there's some really interesting anti-cancer studies, research being done. Yes. Okay, so another great question here, do you lose any of the medicinal properties? No, the particular molecules, most of the medicinal properties from the mushrooms come from a class of compounds called beta-glucans, which are actually very stable to like cooking and freeze drying and all these other sort of things. Anything you want to do to the mushroom, the beta-glucans, which make up a large portion of the different membranes. Each species of mushrooms has different beta-glucans in it. It's just like a class of compounds, but they are the ones that are generally doing a lot of medicinal heavy lifting. And they're pretty tough stuff. No, and again, oh, okay, if you overcook it, there hasn't been a lot of research on overcooking mushrooms. And then, yeah, so I don't know the answer. I would say regular cooking, not a problem. Overcooking, maybe, you know, again, how overcooked is it? So. Oh, yes. Okay, so the question is, if it's overcooked, will it lose some proteins? So it will not lose the proteins, they will just be changed into a different shape. So like egg white, raw versus cooked. You're just changing the shape of the protein. So the protein is still there. And there's actually, in mushrooms, not a lot of protein to begin with. So. Okay. Next up, the reishi mushroom. So we have two there, the Ganoderma curtsy and the Ganoderma sessile. These are, again, very, very common deadwood, Starship Enterprise polypore mushrooms. These grow on just about damn near every dead tree in the Houston area, which is kind of amazing because these are considered the mushrooms of immortality. The ones in Asia, they were only allowed for use by the emperor and the emperor's most beloved ones. And when we get to the medicinal properties, you'll kind of see why. But I already mentioned, so these grow on dead wood. It will grow on pine, it will grow on cedar, it will grow on oak, it will grow on hackberry, it will grow on sweet gum. It grows on dead wood. So it's not specific. The top is red, shiny. Another name for this is sometimes the lacquer mushroom or the varnish mushroom because the top surface is very shiny, like freshly lacquered Japanese woodwork sort of thing. It will have bands in the cap. You can kind of see the bands growing on it here and there. The underside will be white. So if you flip it over, it'll be white on the underside and a polypore. So tiny little holes. You can kind of see the holes on there. It will either have the off-center stem, Starship Enterprise, or just be growing with no stem off the side of the tree. It really depends. Usually these ones with the stem, it will be on the top surface of the tree. Like if you have a stump, they'll be growing off the stump like that. But then on the side of the tree or the side of the stump, they'll just grow as a bracket or shelf mushroom. Spores will be a light tan brown color, and they produce a lot of spores. So the ground around them, the wood beneath them will be covered with this brown powder. These are some of the easiest mushrooms to grow elsewhere. All you need to do is take a cap that's still soft and flexible. You know the pink pet erasers, the rubber, that's what you're looking for. When they're still flexible, like a pink pet rubber eraser, they're good to go. You can just take it and nail it to some dead tree on your property, and 2 years later, it will be covered with these reishi. I've Johnny Appleseeded these all over the place because it's just so good and so dang easy to do. These are a hot weather mushroom, so look for them in July and August, some in June. They can get very large. If we've had a good wet winter, good wet hot summer, they will be 12 inches across. It's absolutely huge. So they're not used as food. They're too hard. It's like a chunk of wood. It's also extremely bitter. But from medicinal, they're anti-cancer. In fact, there are 2 commercial cancer medications made from extracts from the reishi mushroom. One of them helps protect the healthy cells from the damage done by chemotherapy. So the chemotherapy is basically you're trying to kill the cells, you're trying to kill the cancer cells before you kill the healthy cells. But there's compounds in the reishi that help protect the healthy cells from chemical attack. It doesn't just have to be cancer medication. It can be any sort of chemical attack on the cells, which goes again back to the mushroom of immortality. So anti-cancer, one of them helps protect, or one of the compounds in there helps protect the healthy cells from chemical attack, like from chemotherapy drugs. And then the other compounds have been shown to be a tumor preventative. So to prevent the tumors from growing back. Usually after someone has like a kidney cancer and they remove the tumor, they'll be put on different drugs to prevent the tumors from regrowing. One of these is extracted from the reishi mushrooms. They're all over Houston.
We just had a breakthrough experience by Rogan, and we used the Caveman and it's going to Ohio, and it's about this short.
Oh yeah.
This is a big breath, because I've never seen it.
Yeah.
But we have it on our desk, so we can talk about it.
Yep. And if you go to the Foraging Texas website, you do what's called a double extraction, where you first soak it in alcohol. So I have the little jar of vodka here. You're soaking in alcohol to extract the alcohol-soluble compounds in it. And then after 6 to 8 weeks, you take that same material and put it in water and boil it. Then extract the water-soluble. Then you combine the vodka and the water portion. If you go to foragingtexas.com, my website, on the right-hand side, on the left side, there's all these plants and mushrooms. On the right side, there's other information. And one of them is Merriwether's Elixir of Immortality, which is Reishi mushrooms, burdock root, and elderberry flowers. So, anyway, going back to medicinal properties of the reishi mushroom. So we talked about anti-cancer, antimicrobial. So it works to fight bacterial infections, internal and external. Antiviral, that might be useful right now. And antifungal. And people ask, well, it's a fungus. How can it be antifungal? Won't it kill itself? No. It kills all the other fungi. It wants that dead tree to be its tree. No other fungus allowed. No other fungus allowed anywhere. So antifungal.
It sounds like she has the same situation myself. I'm pretty sure it's a reishi. So if it's hot weather, it's been around a while, and even though it's technically kind of winter right now, we've got mild. So is it still like a viable medicinal?
Okay, so the question is, right now, even though we're in the midst of winter, air quotes, is it still viable? So if you look at the underside, and the underside is still white, like this, and it still has that pink pet eraser rubberiness to it, and if you cut it open and squeeze it, you get a little bit of drops of moisture coming out, you're good to go. I was out in the woods 2 weeks ago on the north side of town, and I saw one, And I was a little surprised because this normally isn't the season, but I did it, and it was good. It's like, damn, I wish this was my property. But I got enough growing on mine, that's not a problem. So usually where they're found, dead trees that are in a low part of the woods where it's always moist. So they have a protective microclimate down there too. Yes. Okay, so we do the double extraction. So you soak it first in the alcohol to extract the alcohol-soluble compounds, and then boil it in water to extract the water ones, and then combine them together. And again, the instructions on how to do this are on the Foraging Texas website. So double extraction, extract it first with alcohol, then with water, combine the two. And we're good to go. Yes?
Too much.
Ooh, how much is too much? So they are very bitter in flavor. So another way people take this, and I'm getting to the answer, but just work with me here, is they will take the mushrooms and grind them into a powder and then mix the powder with coffee. And then do whatever they would normally do to reduce the bitterness of the coffee. So you can take it that way. It's not as good as a double extraction because you're not getting the alcohol soluble stuff. You're just getting the water soluble stuff, which is still really good, but it's not all of it. But as far as too much, I have to go through some scientific articles here for you. So under a gram a day of the extract in dissolve. So what this boils down to is 2 shots a day of the double extraction is okay. Now, for a young child, maybe 1 shot a day. But like with my elixir of immortality, I'd throw 2 shots into my evening tea. And yeah, I'm 600 and some years old, so I think it seems to be working. But yeah, very common all over the place, especially July, August into September, pretty much as long as we don't have an Arctic blast, which we haven't really had some cold weather, but if it's in a protected area, it should be okay. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions about the reishi mushroom? If not, we got a question. Yes. Okay, so yeah. So the question is, are there any other local native mushrooms that can be mistaken for this one? No. That's one of the things with the presentation. I picked mushrooms that don't have mimics. So if you have this red, shiny banded cap, white underside, Starship Enterprise sort of thing, you got the reishi. Okay, woodsy. If you like hot and sour soup, this is the mushroom in hot and sour soup. This is all over the place right now in Houston. So this grows on dead wood, and it likes elms. It really loves dead elderberry. So grows very well in the dead elderberry. This falls in the jelly type of mushroom. It's flexible. It's like a piece of rubbery jelly gummy mushroom sort of thing, but not sticky. The top side will be gray and fuzzy. The underneath side will be a dark brown. No stem, it's just like stuck right, the back edge of the mushroom is stuck to the tree. It does produce brown spores, and it is a cool weather mushroom. And I got some other pictures here. If you find them on the tree where if it hasn't rained for weeks, 2-3 weeks, you will see them looking like this. It'll almost look like a desiccated mouse pelt on the side of the tree, with the top being this gray, fuzzy sort of appearance and feel. And then the underside will be really dark. You can take these, drop them in hot water, and they will swell back up into these. If you go to the Asian markets around here, the H Mart or the 99 Ranch, the black mushroom, it is just dehydrated woodsier mushrooms. You put them in the hot water and they swell back up. So even if they look like, you know, a mouse skin on the side of the tree, you can still harvest them and use them. How do you eat them? Okay, food, hot and sour soup. The woods ear themselves do not have any flavor. They absorb the flavor from your sauces. So you want to put them in things, very spicy stuff. I'm thinking of woods ear chili. Please don't hate me. Yeah, but anything that has a lot of flavor to it already. Really, the main purpose, food-wise, for the woods ear is as an interesting texture to the food. So stews, curries, anything like that. Medicinal. Oops. Can I move this again? Can I just move this? So we have the wound healing. So like the earlier mushroom, a poultice of this mashed up mushroom applied to a slow healing wound has been shown to stimulate and speed up the healing of wounds. Anti-cancer, antioxidant, so you got to take care of those free radicals, the antioxidants for that, and anti-diabetic, again, helping control sugar. In this case, the mechanism, from what I've been able to see, it looks like the compounds in the wood ear mushroom actually bind to the sugar in your digestive tract and don't release it. So it doesn't pass from your stomach into your blood. So you don't get the blood spike. You can have an extra dessert. Get your hot and sour soup at the beginning of the meal. You go to the self-serve ice cream and load that baby up. But yeah, so the woods ear, anti-diabetic. Very common right now. This one is actually pretty much all year round. In the Houston area, the Sam Houston National Forest, the Davy Crockett. It's a pretty tough mushroom because even if it's not flexible like an ear at the time, it's going to be dehydrated and still harvested. Again, if you're starting to see like a green mildew on the mouse fur, don't eat it then. But otherwise, you're good to go. Any questions on the woods ear?
You mentioned that on two. I've been hearing about like mold illness. People getting mold and mushrooms are the same mold, right?
Yeah. So
It is mildew.
yeah, mold and mildew are fungi, and in particular, the black mildew is the one that causes all the health problems because it releases a number of compounds that attack the brain and attack the lungs. But that's just one specific family of mushrooms, not all mushrooms, not all black mushrooms. So, but yeah, mold and mildew is fungi.
I just remember you also saying that something raw. That made me think of that whole thing. I was like, well, that's raw. That was one of your things. Anyway, here's my question.
Okay. All right. So we talked about, you know, the ones I picked tonight were what I consider the best beginner mushrooms. They are very distinctive structural features. There's no mimic to them, or the mimics, you know, like with the Heresium. There are 3 different types of Heresium, genus, species in the Houston area. All of them are edible, so you're good. But if you're wondering what other types of edible ones out there, so we got the shaggy mane, ringless honey, inkskep, witch's butter, deer, Caesar, fringe, sawgill, wolf's fart, common stinkhorn. I will tell you, the gardens over here, just outside here, are loaded with the common stinkhorn. And then the cauliflower, and then from the medicinal side, turkey tail, artist conch, hoof, and then the poisonous ones, the destroying angel, the death cap, the green vomiter, and the red vomiter. These are ones you should probably warn. Very, very distinctive, very easy to identify once you know what to do. Okay, so mushroom books. There are 3 I strongly recommend. Now, here's the thing. One book is generally not enough to identify the mushroom because, as we mentioned at the beginning, there's like 2 orders of magnitude more mushrooms out there than there are plants. And so a comprehensive book of mushrooms, even just for Texas, would be the size of like 5 Bibles. So, but as far as a lot of the common mushrooms, these 3 books I really like. for just general mushroom identification. The Texas mushrooms by Meltzer. Meltzer is like considered, it was the first Texas-specific mushroom book. It's still very, very good. There's also the mushrooms of the Southeast. But if I were going to get just one, it would be 100 Edible Mushrooms by Michael Coe. Specifically because he goes through, he actually starts you out in a grocery store, as you buy a portobello, as you buy the button mushroom, as you buy a few others, and then he walks you through the dissection of them to teach you, when I talk about false gill and true gill, you know, this has this has that. So you learn the structures on mushrooms that have already been identified, assuming the produce manager at H.D. knows what he or she is doing, and they have the right name on the mushroom. But he teaches you what to look at the mushroom. And then you go in the woods looking specifically for the edible ones. And a lot of the edible mushrooms can be found in Texas. And I just got to put a plug. If you go to amazon.com/shop/foraging Texas and buy these books from there, I get 6 cents. It's awesome. It's awesome. Okay, so yeah, that's a brief introduction on useful medicinal mushrooms. You can get a hold of me, Medicine Man Plant Co., foragingtexas.com. If you want to have questions, mark at mmplantco.com. So any questions here? And then I'm going to jump over to the chat to see if there's any questions there. Yes?
Well, on the subject of books, is it true that you have another book coming out soon?
Oh, the secret is out. Yeah. So it was supposed to be out March 22nd, but supply chain issues. But on May 3rd, I'll have a new book, The Outdoor Adventure Guide Foraging, will be out. And what's really great about that one is I actually get royalties. So for the Idiot's Guide Foraging, I don't get anything from it, except I read the reviews and they say, oh, it's awesome, and my head gets that much bigger. Which is, I can't do anything other than just feel good about myself, but that's important. But yeah, May 3rd, Outdoor Adventure Guide Foraging will be out and about. On Amazon, my websites, all that.
Maybe mushroom for seasonal.
Ooh, okay, a question. Any mushrooms for seasonal allergies? The best you're going to do is probably the oyster mushroom and the lion's mane mushrooms for their anti-inflammatory. But a better thing for that would be stinging nettle, fenugreek, and goldenrod. We can talk after that. All right. Okay, just quickly scanning through the chat here. Okay, person is asking, do you peel the puffball mushroom? It depends. Okay, this is, you know when you get a sunburn and your skin is peeling and it's actually kind of therapeutic to peel that off? That's why I peel the skin off the puffball mushrooms, because it just feels nice to peel the skin off the puffball mushrooms. I'm not a psychopath, I swear. But you don't have to peel it, but the texture is somewhat improved by peeling the skin off the puffball. Okay, oh, here's a good question. Will you receive the same amount of vitamin D from a cooked mushroom? So if we go back to the beginning when I said mushrooms are not plants, mushrooms are closer to animals. One thing they found that if you expose mushrooms, even the white button mushrooms that you get from the store, to sunlight or ultraviolet light, they start producing vitamin D, just like we do. So it's a great source of vitamin D is by exposing your mushrooms. You get your white button mushrooms, set them on a windowsill, a sunny windowsill, your canning bed, if you got one of those, something like that, bump up the vitamin D. And then you have about 2 days to use them, and the vitamin D will remain. Cooking it will remove some of the vitamin D, but a lot of it will still remain. So, yeah, cool question. What else do we have? All right, saute, really great. Olive oil, skip the butter. Okay, olive oil is not a cooking oil. Olive oil has a very low smoke point. And if you heat it up to saute temperatures, you're actually going to burn the olive oil, causing cancer-causing compounds. Don't cook with olive oil. Sprinkle it on things. Okay. Do lion mane mushrooms have tubes as gills? Yes. So the parts dangling down, they're little tubes with little tiny holes at the end. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that about olive. Olive oil is great for you, just don't heat it up. All right, yeah, lion's mane is super expensive. Okay, the oyster mushrooms, you break them off. Again, it's best to cut them off. If you break them off, you end up with wood bark and other stuff in there like that. So cut them off. Also, when you just pull them off the tree, you're going to disrupt the mycelium, the root structure. You want to leave that behind because that's what's going to produce more mushrooms. Yes?
So this mushroom 9% specifically
Yes. Yeah. Go to, Amazon.com/shop/foraging Texas. There's a section on mushrooms. It has the mushroom knife. It even has microscope slides for doing the spore prints. Oops. All right. Anything else here? Just looking quick. Oh, what's the canning book? The canning book is the Ball Blue Book of Canning and Preserving. Ball Blue Book of Canning and Preserving. The pickled okra recipe. Okay, so, foraging in the big thicket. No, you are not allowed to harvest mushrooms in the big thicket. The only places you can harvest mushrooms legally, other than private land with permission, are the Sam Houston National Forest, the Davy Crockett National Forest, and the Angelina National Forest. Not the Sam Houston State Park. It has to be the National Forest. Ooh, here's a good one. Okay, Jenny, I understand it's not dangerous to touch mushrooms. Is it ever dangerous to breathe spores in from the mushroom you're identifying? In most cases, that will not be a problem except for puffballs. So puffball mushrooms are designed to spray up into the wind in big clouds. And if you inhale it, you end up growing mushrooms in your lungs. Not a good thing. But generally, just like looking at it and so forth, no, they're not producing enough spores at any given time. It could be an issue. No, don't like stick it up to your nose or anything. All right. Okay, that looks like all that. Ooh, more questions. Okay.
This is a general question on mushrooms. I heard that they play a very important role in nature as a network, a communication network for other plants to actually interact with each other. Is there any question?
Yeah, okay, so the question is, they've read that there are networks of fungi connecting trees and bushes and plants, and they basically talk to one another across that. The answer is yes, 100%. The fungi basically make the internet of the world underneath everything. They've shown that the fungus in most cases want to keep the tree alive until such time as it dies naturally, and then they take it. But long story short, they will transport chemicals that plants need from one area to another to keep plants healthy. They will signal if plants are under attack. One of the ways they let the other plants around it know is through chemicals that trigger the fungi to basically, it's like a telephone game. The tree releases chemicals, the fungi picks it up, which triggers a chemical release throughout the rest of the fungi to alert the other trees around it, hey, something's eating a tree over here. So yeah, they are the internet the way nature talks to them.
Mark, we're going to have to close down the bar. Because,
Oh, I'm out of here.
we need to kind of clean up and pack up. But I would suggest that, I know that there are more questions. I can see some hands. And so come on up then.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Mark is willing to stick around.
You fed me, so I'm good.
Yeah.